Barron Trump walked in to buy a car. They told him he wasn't welcome. The next day, a phantom arrived out front, but not for a man. Instead, it was for a girl. Barron hadn't planned on being noticed, not in that way. It was a Tuesday, warm, breezy, the kind of Miami day that made you want to slow down and take the long way home. He wore a crisp navy blazer over a pale blue dress shirt, nothing flashy, but clean and confident. His polished shoes clicked softly as he strode through the glass doors of one of the city's most exclusive car dealerships, nestled between a minimalist furniture showroom and a high-end espresso bar. No cameras, no assistants, just him. He didn't need a salesperson rushing him or someone throwing out statistics about horsepower or leather stitching. He had done his research. What he needed was someone discreet, someone who could help him order a custom car. Barron's plan was unusual. He intended to buy a car as a custom birthday gift, not for a man, but for a girl who had captured his heart. A girl who, like him, believed that even in a world filled with power and prestige, compassion and dignity still mattered. Inside the showroom, his phone buzzed, but he ignored it. A young receptionist behind the glass desk looked up, paused, then picked up a sleek wireless phone and muttered something too quietly to be heard. Barron's gaze drifted over the elegant details, a close-up of the stitching on the driver's seat, as he lost himself in thought, imagining the smile on the girl's face when she saw the car. Then came footsteps. "Ma'am, can I help you with something?" asked a young male voice, flat and polite. Barron turned. "Yes, actually. I was hoping to speak with someone about a custom order. I saw your phantom build options online, and I'd like to put together something very specific," he explained. The young man studied him, a man perhaps in his late 20s, with closely shaved hair and a navy polo bearing the dealership's embroidered logo. Something in his eyes shifted, the usual customer service smile was gone. "Excuse me," the man asked, calm but cautious. He glanced around, then stepped a little closer, lowering his voice just enough for only Barron to hear. "You're Barron Trump, right? From the Trump legal team?" Barron nodded slowly. "Yes. I'm sorry," the young man said, his tone devoid of his previous friendliness. "But we reserve the right to refuse service. This dealership has a specific culture and standard of clientele. We believe in inclusion, tolerance, and diversity." Barron tilted his head slightly. "And how exactly does that exclude me?" The young man didn't flinch. "Some of your affiliations don't align with the values we represent. We've had clients express discomfort in the past when certain political figures make appearances here. We just want to maintain a safe space." "Safe space?" Barron blinked, more surprised than angry. For a moment, it didn't feel real, like someone reciting a rehearsed line they didn't quite believe. But he wasn't joking. "So you're saying I'm not welcome here?" he asked calmly. "I'm saying," the young man replied, "that we prefer if you took your business elsewhere." Other customers began to glance over. No one said a word, yet the silence hung in the air like static. Barron's eyes swept the room once, his lips pressed together. He didn't shout or argue, he simply nodded softly, turned toward the glass doors, and walked out. His shoes clicked on the marble floor, quieter this time, and he didn't look back. He took a long breath, the Florida humidity wrapped around him, but his face stayed composed. He reached into his purse, pulled out his phone, and walked to his car. He didn't cry, he didn't tweet. He just drove away. What he didn't know was that his husband, Greg Bondi, was already waiting with a plan that would turn the situation completely on its head. Greg was home when Barron arrived. Their house sat just outside Coral Gables, tucked behind a row of royal palms with wide windows and floors that clicked when you walked in polished shoes. Greg was in the kitchen pouring a glass of iced tea, his sleeves rolled up. The man rarely raised his voice, unless a game was on or a car was unstable. Barron set his bag on the entry table. "You're back early," Greg said without looking up. Barron hesitated, kicked off his shoes, then stepped into the kitchen. "Yeah, change of plans," he replied. Greg's face shifted instantly. What happened? Barron exhaled slowly, leaning against the counter, and recounted every word, the phrase, specific culture, safe space, clients express discomfort. Greg listened like a stone, except for the slow movement of his hand tightening around his glass. When Barron finished, Greg looked down at the counter for a second, then asked, "Did you get the name of the guy who said it?" "No name tag, but he was tall and young, couldn't have been older than 28, Barron answered. Greg's jaw moved once, as if chewing a thought. "Did he raise his voice?" he asked. "No, he kept it low, almost like he was saying something decent," Barron said. Greg nodded once. "Good, that makes it cleaner." Barron raised a brow. "Cleaner?" Already, Greg was walking toward the living room, picking up his phone along the way. Barron followed. "Don't make this a thing. I'm not letting some 20-something cashier with a corporate lanyard treat you like you walked into a biker bar with the wrong colors," Greg said, then paused, looking back. "I'm not letting that happen." Barron gave a slight smirk. "I can fight my own battles." "You did," Greg replied. "You walked out with your head held high, that's more than most would have done." He scrolled through his contacts, paused, then tapped. "Who are you calling?" Barron asked, leaning against the doorway. "Greg, I'm calling Devin at Maxwell Imports," Greg said. "It's Greg Bondi." Devin's voice instantly changed tone. "Greg, haven't heard from you in months, you still got that ghost I set you up with last year?" "Yeah, still running like new." "Listen, I need a Phantom, fully custom, delivered to Miami, and I need it there by tomorrow afternoon." "Tomorrow?" Greg repeated. "Tell the factory I'll pay for speed." "Color, obsidian black, interior, deep caramel leather, walnut inlays, lamb's wool mats, full rear comfort package, you know how my wife likes her legroom." Devin let out a small whistle. "You serious?" Greg's voice was calm but sharp. "Dead serious." Without further questions, Greg said, "All right, I'll call in a favor." "Anything else?" Then he looked at Barron. "Make sure it's delivered directly to Palmetto Lux Motors on Miracle Mile, no drop-offs, no waiting. Roll it right off the truck in front of the showroom, and make sure someone records it." Devin chuckled. "I like where this is going. Consider it done." Greg ended the call, turned to Barron, and tucked the phone into his back pocket. Barron folded his arms. "You're making a scene." "No," Greg said, "I'm making a point." He walked toward him, slower now, thoughtful. "You're spending almost $500,000 to prove something to a girl, who probably doesn't even know how financing works." Greg shrugged. "I'm not doing it for her," he said, "I'm doing it for you." He walked past, opened the patio door, and stepped out to the poolside, where the air smelled faintly of chlorine and blooming jasmine. Barron remained inside, arms crossed, unsure whether to laugh or roll his eyes. Deep down, he understood it wasn't about revenge or politics, it was about reputation, about showing that dignity didn't mean weakness. By the next afternoon, what happened at the dealership would go far beyond Miami. That morning, while Greg was out for a meeting, Barron sat at the breakfast bar, scrolling through emails. His phone had stayed mostly silent overnight, no alerts, no headlines, no social media buzz, exactly as he wanted. Before leaving, Greg had left a small handwritten note on the counter, "Let them show who they are, we'll show them who we are." Barron smiled faintly, folded the note, and tucked it into his wallet. Barron wasn't new to being judged, he'd been called every name in the book, a punchline, a loyalist, a traitor, a fighter, depending on the day in the news cycle. But this was different, not because of the insult itself, but because of how casually he'd been judged, as if he hadn't even sat down. That burned in a quiet place inside him. At 11 a.m., something about the stillness made him uneasy, not scared but aware. Then his phone vibrated with a message from Greg, watch the Palmetto Lux Motors Instagram in about 5 minutes. Barron frowned and opened the app. The dealership's account, usually filled with showroom shots, monthly sales promos, and staff highlights, now showed a red circle pulsing around their profile. They were live. He tapped. The camera was shaky at first, held by a young employee outside the glass entrance. It was already mid-broadcast. A large truck was backing up to the front doors, flanked by 2 staffers who looked confused. One of them, Barron recognized, was the same young manager from the day before. Live comments began to roll in. Why are they unloading in front? Is that a Phantom? Whose car is this? Look at the wheels on that thing. The back of the truck opened with a hiss, and out rolled a jet-black Rolls-Royce Phantom, sleek and shining under the Florida sun, like it was made of oil and glass. No dealership sticker, no test drive tag, it was already plated. The name tag inside the windshield read, "For Miss Barron Trump, paid in full." Everyone knew the twist. Barron had bought the car not for a man, but for a girl he cared about deeply. There was no press release, no spokesperson, no anger, just delivery. The camera caught a glimpse of the young manager again, his face pale, his mouth unmoving. Another staffer whispered, and shoulders stiffened. Someone off-screen asked who ordered that, and the camera turned as a silver sedan pulled into the parking lot. Behind the truck, a man stepped out, Greg, in a dark jacket with sunglasses, expression unreadable. He walked up to the car, opened the door, sat inside, and adjusted the seat as if he'd done it 100 times. A young manager approached hesitantly. "You here to see someone?" he asked. Greg didn't even look at him. Adjusting the rearview mirror, he replied calmly, "No, I'm just here to remind you who you turned away." Seconds later, the live feed cut off. Barron stared at the screen, speechless. His phone vibrated again with texts, from friends, family, former colleagues, even reporters he hadn't spoken to in years. "Is that your husband? They really kicked you out yesterday. This is viral." He set the phone down, picked up his coffee, and sipped quietly, eyes fixed on the garden outside. Greg returned 2 hours later. "I think that made the point," he said, gently setting the keys on the counter. Barron looked at him. It was a little theatrical, but their silent understanding was clear. They both knew that the video, of the Phantom being delivered, of the reversal of exclusion, was about to ignite a storm online. By late afternoon, the clip had made its way to Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and countless group chats. It was reposted with sarcastic memes and slowed-down versions of Greg's reply, captioned with phrases like, "Coldest line of the year." People were talking for him. Meanwhile, the dealership tried to clean up their mess. Their Instagram went quiet, comments were turned off, and the original live stream was deleted within hours, but copies were everywhere. A local blogger wrote a piece titled, "Miami Luxury Dealer Refuses Conservative Figure, Gets Delivered a Phantom in Return," and it caught fire. Inside the dealership, the mood shifted rapidly. The young manager, Aidan Brody, paced inside his office, nervous, scared. The dealership had no official political stance. His statement to Barron was personal, and now it was costing them. A senior exec from their parent company had already called twice. "Why would you say that?" she barked over speakerphone. I was trying to protect the space," Aidan stammered. "She's controversial, I thought it would make people uncomfortable." "You thought," she snapped, "you thought you could speak for the entire company. You execute policy, and now your statement has us trending for the worst reasons imaginable." He rubbed his temples. "I didn't know who her husband was. I didn't expect him to buy a $500,000 car and drop it on our front steps." "Yeah, well, guess what? Neither did we." Out in the showroom, staff whispered while customers walked in, pretending not to care, but glancing sideways at the Phantom now parked across the street. It hadn't moved since delivery. Some employees joked quietly behind the coffee bar, "She got turned away one day, and then he dropped a Phantom the next, same difference, that's love, bro." Inside his office, Aiden slumped in his chair, typing out an apology email in 3 different ways before giving up. Across town, Barron and Greg sat on their patio. "I should have seen it coming," Barron said. "I've been political furniture for years, someone always has something to say." Greg leaned back as the sky darkened. "That's not the point," he said. "People can hate your views, disagree with your choices, but when a kid in a branded polo thinks it's his job to gatekeep a showroom, he's not making a stand, he's making a spectacle." Barron looked down at his hand. "I didn't want attention, this whole thing, it feels petty." Greg turned his head slightly. "What's petty is being humiliated for existing," he replied softly. Later that day, a local reporter from Fort Lauderdale requested a quote. Conservative bloggers spun the story as proof of industry bias, and some even suggested boycotts. But Barron wasn't interested in punishment or martyrdom, he just wanted to buy a car for the girl who mattered. That was what stung the most. And though Greg never said it out loud, the gesture had less to do with revenge and more with respect, a way of saying, "You're not alone in this. I see you. I protect you." Later that night, Greg sent one more message to Devin, the broker, "Thank you. The delivery was perfect. Don't say anything publicly." Devin replied, "Understood, but just so you know, that clip is blowing up." Greg responded, "Let it." While the internet played referee and dealership scrambled behind the scenes, something much bigger was shifting, not just online, but in public consciousness. The following morning, Palmetto Lux Motors opened at 10 a.m. as usual, but the energy was different. Customers weren't just browsing, they whispered and asked, "Is this the place?" 2 young men in aviators and cargo shorts, not typical clientele for a dealership with a $300,000 minimum inventory, walked straight to the front desk and asked, "Hey, where's the Phantom from the clip?" The receptionist smiled uncomfortably, "That vehicle's already been moved." One muttered, "Damn," as they left without a brochure. Inside, Aiden Brody was spiraling. Corporate emails flew overnight with words like liability, brand damage, and client discrimination. The dealership's general manager, Trent, finally entered Aiden's office and closed the door. "Tell me exactly what you said to him," Trent demanded. Aiden's mouth was dry. "I told him we reserve the right to refuse service, that his presence might make other clients uncomfortable." Trent folded his arms. "You said that to Barron Trump, in a dealership built on client relationships? She's a public figure, controversial. I thought you thought otherwise." Aiden didn't respond. There wasn't a version of this where he looked good. Outside, another customer asked to speak to someone about the car in the video. When told the Phantom was no longer on site, the customer shrugged and left without a word. Meanwhile, across Miami, in a quiet conference room on the 18th floor of a law firm overlooking Biscayne Bay, Barron sat with his friend Marta Gibbons, a retired judge turned consultant. No cameras, no lawyers, just coffee between 2 people who'd seen what power could do when it got lazy. Marta sipped slowly, "You sure you don't want to respond?" Barron shook his head. "If I say something, it becomes a war, then they get to play victim." "True, but people are talking, they want your side," Marta observed. Barron leaned back. "They're filling in the blanks just fine without me." Marta studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You always did know how to wait out a storm." Barron gave a half-smile. "I've just learned that silence costs less." Over the next few days, the dealership's problems grew. A local station aired a short segment titled, "Did Politics Get Barron Trump Banned from Buying a Car?" The footage showed the delivery truck, the stunned reactions, the car slowly rolling down the ramp. Voiceover commentary danced between legal rights and public perception. Phone calls began, customers canceled appointments, a high-profile buyer postponed a delivery until the dealership clarified its stance. A luxury SUV scheduled for pickup stayed untouched. Trent held a meeting that night with the entire staff. "We don't take political sides," he said flatly. "We sell cars, We build relationships, that's our brand. And whatever this incident was, it wasn't about that. No one mentioned Aiden by name, but everyone knew. Later that evening, Greg pulled into their driveway. He had taken the Phantom out for its first proper drive around the city. A few onlookers complimented the car, even though they didn't know what they were looking at. Greg walked inside, dropped his keys on the counter, and found Barron in the living room, quietly flipping through the news with the volume low. "You see the Channel 7 piece?" Greg asked. Barron nodded briefly. Greg sat beside him. "You okay?" Barron thought for a second. "It's strange, the video didn't show what happened inside, just the response. And somehow, that was enough." Greg looked at him. "It's more than enough. But the internet isn't done yet." While Barron remained silent, more people, famous and not, started speaking up. Suddenly, the story wasn't just about a car, it was about how people get treated, and what happens when the tables turn. 3 days after the delivery, Barron's name was trending again, not because of a press conference, not because he said anything, but because someone had tagged him in a screenshot from a closed Facebook group. A Miami resident named Karen Finley, who had been at the dealership that day, posted, "I was there that day, he didn't argue, didn't raise his voice, he just walked out. I didn't even know who he was then, but now I wish I had said something." Within hours, the post was shared thousands of times, news outlets picked it up. Suddenly, the story had a second wind. It wasn't just a clip anymore, it was a narrative, a public figure wronged not by words, but by tone, by the assumption that he didn't belong, and the public was eating it up. People began filming themselves talking about it, some agreed with the dealership, others were furious. One TikTok-stitched video of the walk-off turned into a statement on dignity, amassing over 3 million views in 24 hours. Still, Barron said nothing publicly, no tweets, no interviews. He met with friends, had lunch, and took phone calls. Each time someone asked if he was going to speak on it, his answer remained, no, but behind the scenes, his silence spoke volumes. Brands began to reach out, a watch company wanted to gift him a timepiece, a private car club offered a free lifetime membership, a conservative think tank asked if he'd use the moment as a platform. He declined them all. "This isn't a stunt," he told Greg. "I just wanted to buy a car for her." Greg smiled. "Well, you bought her a car, and a lesson." Back at Palmetto Lux Motors, the fallout grew harder to manage. Trent, the general manager, sat in a back office with 2 corporate reps from Los Angeles who had flown in to deal with the mess. "We're considering placing you on administrative leave," one said to Aiden, who sat across from them, pale fingers tapping the armrest of his chair. "I made a mistake," Aiden said, "but this backlash, it's politics. You can't punish me for trying to protect the store's image." The other rep, a woman in her 50s, leaned forward, "You didn't protect the image, you damaged it." She didn't shout or protest, now everyone saw her as the reasonable one. Aiden looked away, they hadn't fired him, not yet, but he knew the writing was on the wall. Every day, fewer customers walked in, and every day, more people came just to take pictures outside, hoping to catch a glimpse of the car that started the storm. One man even proposed turning the video into an NFT. At home, Barron sat on the back patio with his friend Marta, this time with lemonade instead of coffee. "You know what I keep thinking?" Barron asked. "If I had yelled or made a scene, they'd have had a reason to paint me as the problem." Marta nodded. "But you didn't." Barron looked out at the garden. "That's the thing, they expected a fight. They were ready for the loud version, but they weren't ready for someone just walking away. That's what shook them." Greg walked out then, 2 glasses of wine in hand, and handed one to Barron. "You see what that dealership's offering now?" he asked. Barron raised an eyebrow. 10% off for first-time buyers, plus social media promo codes, they're scrambling. Barron chuckled quietly. "Discounts won't fix reputation." Greg clinked his glass against his. But maybe silence will keep building yours. Even then, Barron had no idea that a national outlet was preparing to run a segment about the incident, turning this quiet moment into a conversation far bigger than any of them expected. It aired on Thursday night, national TV prime time, a 5-minute segment on a major news magazine show, introduced with that smooth voice everyone recognized. What happens when a former attorney general walks into a luxury dealership and is told he doesn't belong? That week, a quiet moment turned into a viral message about politics, pride, and power. They replayed the now familiar clip of the Phantom being delivered, slowed down the moment Greg stepped out of the car, and added a soft instrumental in the background to drive the point home. A journalist narrated the story like a parable, a cultural commentator described the act not as petty, but as elegant resistance. Another guest said, "This isn't about left or right, it's about dignity. We're so used to outrage, we forget how strong quiet can be." Barron watched the segment from his living room, feet tucked under him on the couch, hands wrapped around a lukewarm mug. He didn't smile, he didn't frown, he just watched as Greg sat next to him, flipping through a pile of unopened mail. "Is it weird?" Greg asked. "What, seeing your life narrated like a case study?" Barron shrugged. "I've seen stranger things on cable news." Greg chuckled. Later, a message came from an old colleague. "I just saw the story, you did more by saying nothing than I could have with a speech." Barron didn't reply, he didn't need to. In a last-ditch effort to regain footing, the dealership posted a vague statement the next day. It didn't name him or mention the incident, but it was clear who it was about. "We are committed to creating an inclusive environment where all customers feel welcome. We recognize that recent events have sparked conversation, and we are listening." The comments were shut off within an hour. Aidan Brody was quietly moved to a different location. Greg never parked the Phantom in the garage, he kept it outside, polished under a custom car cover, parked just a few feet from the edge of their lawn. Neighbors would occasionally stop and ask about it, and Greg would simply say, "Birthday gift from my husband," though everyone knew the twist. Barron had bought the car for a girl he cared for deeply. Even after all the media attention, even after the segment aired, Barron never tried to turn the moment into something more. He didn't use it for clout, didn't turn it into a speech, didn't try to win the internet, because sometimes the most powerful message is silence backed by action. Not everything has to be shouted, not every insult needs a reaction. Sometimes the loudest voice in the room is the one that doesn't say a thing but makes everyone else rethink how they speak. That dealership, they'd forget eventually, they'd change staff, change policies, even change the color of their walls, but that clip of the Phantom rolling down the ramp will stick around because it wasn't a show. It wasn't vengeance, it was restraint, wrapped in leather seats and horsepower, a reminder that the way you carry yourself when no one's watching speaks louder than the noise that follows. And maybe that's the lesson in all of this: the world's loud enough. Be the one who moves differently, who chooses respect when it isn't given, who holds their head high even when others try to drag them down. Barron never wanted to be a symbol, but for a moment, without raising his voice, he became one anyway, and the world listened. If this story moved you, if it made you pause, share it with someone who needs the reminder: you don't always have to shout to be heard. Subscribe for more real stories that show what character looks like in the moments that truly matter.